Okay. We're going to get started with the seminar, and I appreciate you guys for coming and being a part of this. As mentioned in the flyer and everything, we're going to be talking about developing leadership in ministry. From the start, let me ask you guys, what are some of the things you're hoping to get from this today by being here? Huh? Leadership, okay. That it?
Strategies to be a better leader.
Okay, strategies. Have you all ever had any kind of strategy training on leadership before? In school or? Do what?
I went to a leadership forum when I was a junior in high school.
Okay. A junior in high school. So it's been a long time.
Yeah, I think it was Harding's way of trying to recruit.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Harding's way of recruiting. Throw that plug out there. All right.
Dealing with issues like you, me, and Jared were talking the other day, just kind of stuff with golf and ins and outs. We don't really think about what may come up. These people may bring up an issue that is unimportant. So really just dealing with the things you don't normally think about.
Yeah, yeah. Dealing with things you don't really think about. And that's what I want us to look at today is this seminar is going to talk about, and we're going to look at some different things dealing with leadership. The first question that we want to look at in dealing with this is, you know, I've spent almost 20 years now in full-time ministry of some kind. And I know, Ray, you've spent just about that long, about maybe a little bit more, something like that. And some of you guys, how many of you guys, this is your first year in full-time ministry? Okay, so we got 3 in here. You're brand new to it. How many are 5 years or less in full-time ministry? Okay, how many are volunteers? Part-time? Yeah, you consider volunteer? One of the things that I've seen over again about leadership is I'm always adapting and learning and growing, and no matter what, there's always something else that comes up that I learn from every day. And so leadership is one of those things that you're always growing in it. And one of the things after 20 years of ministry is that my leadership style has changed over the years. When I was younger, I had one mentality and thought about how leadership was, especially as a youth minister. My view of how to lead a youth group and what activities and what things are important, even the way I approached the parents, were completely different than they are now as being a parent who has kids in the youth group and sees it from a whole different perspective. I've even changed my leadership style when it comes to that. So leadership is something that is always changing, but there's a few things we want to look at that can hopefully give you some foundation as you're being directed or you're trying to learn and grow in your leadership. First of all, what is leadership? What is leadership? By the way, if you have your manuals, everybody should have a manual in here. If you open up the first section is what we're going to be looking at. We're going to deal with the idea of what is leadership. What's it mean to be a great leader?
You're out in front.
Okay, you're out in front. Okay.
People want to follow you.
All right, people want to follow you. You're trying to be a good example.
Also, end result, if you have all those qualities, but you don't accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, then what kind of leader are you really?
Right.
I think a lot of it's measured by the result of your guidance.
Yeah. What made you guys want to do ministry in the first place? To be a good leader? All right.
I had a good time in the youth group, so I figured.
You got a good time in youth groups, so you're just going to keep it going the rest of your life, right?
I had certain leaders that I looked up to.
Okay.
Kind of spoken to me and said, hey, you can do this. This is something that I think you should do.
Yeah.
So that motivated me to want to be a leader like that.
Yeah, great. And I think that's part of it too, is how many of you guys had somebody in your life that was a good leader that really inspired you and encouraged you to get to the point you're at now, the way you wanted to do this? I think most all of us, right? We all at some point have had some people that made an impact on our life that made a difference to where we said, you know, I really want to be that for somebody else. And so those are good qualities of leadership. We're going to do an activity that I want us to break up into teams for as we get started this morning, as we talk about this idea of leadership. And so what we're going to do is we've got 10, we'll have to have 2 groups of 3, 1 group of 4. So I'll let you go over here, Justin. You 3, our team, and the 4 of you guys, which looks dangerous. But what we're going to do first, though, is I'm going to pass out some quotes. These are quotes of great leaders, or people that are considered great leaders. They're leadership quotes. I want you to look at your quote. They're just random. And then what you can do with these is, in just a minute, after I give these out, I want you to kind of walk around the room, talk with each other, share your quote with each other. If you don't like your quote and you want to trade with somebody and they'll let you, by all means do that. And then after I let you guys spend a few times sharing the quotes with each other, I want you to think about them. I'll give you some instructions of what we're going to do in our groups. Okay? So just take these quotes, look at them, think about why it's a good quote on leadership. There you go. All right, y'all got them? Okay, so share your quotes with everybody, and then just a minute we'll break up in our groups. So you guys got to get up for this.
What are we supposed to do? I'm sorry.
You've got to get up and walk around and share your quotes with everybody. Yes, yes, sorry. Yeah, if they'll trade with you, you can trade. No, you don't have to trade if you don't want to.
Great leader.
Maxwell is the man on leadership, that's all.
You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
What's that?
I only got to drive through three seats. Everything else was red.
Did you not take the beach excursion?
It's further from this house.
Yeah, no,
I live on 50.
I know, but it actually balances out.
Same one? Good.
Did y'all have the same quote? Did y'all have the same quote?
No, we just got 2.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
I had a German one, but I wanted an American tradition. I had a Polish.
All right, guys. If y'all will get in your groups and turn to page 9 in your manuals, there's instructions on there of what I'd like you to do in your groups now. What I want to do is to think about this topic as we get started this morning about this idea of leadership, defining what a good leader is. Y'all have already shared some thoughts about it. But I want you to look at page 9. And in your groups, I want you to do these 3 things. I want you to make sure that everyone shares their quotes within your group, what quote you have. Study all the quotes you have within your group. And then the third thing is I want you to make a list of good qualities of leaders. What makes a good leader? What makes a great leader? And try to come up with that list. I'm going to pass out some poster board for each group and a marker. You can decide who gets to write, whoever has the neatest handwriting, I guess. And then I want you to write those down as a group and make your list of what qualities make a good leader. All right? So go ahead and get your groups, and I'll pass out that poster board. Here's one for y'all. Who's writing? Andrew, you got the nice handwriting? Look, I got the good poster board too. So, here you go. Who's writing? Okay. Are you doing a handwriting analysis? Yes. Very good. That's a good idea. Okay. Yeah, y'all can spread out if you want to. I'm gonna give you about 5 minutes to come up with a list of what makes a good leader. They did a handwriting analysis to see who's going to do theirs. Do what?
Guys, follow my lead. See what in there?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Are you writing or not? Is this about John leadership? All right.
John, you want us to? Hey, John, are we drawing this list or creating our own list?
You're creating your own list. Yeah, that's all.
It doesn't mean that you do it.
Yeah, it's just those are. Try to go as big as you can.
That's kind of like game plan.
You know, the leaders also follow some.
Right. Yeah, a couple.
You like it now?
Yeah. I just have to read it like 40 times to get
Yeah, some of those you have to look at a little bit, and if you know the history of the person, it kind of helps too.
Right.
Yes.
Are we writing other things rather than that?
Yeah,
Do
I
take
mean-
up this whole poster board.
Yeah, and I know you guys have got that open, but if you just kind of come up with your own list,
Okay.
there might be some of the same on there. No, did I say page 9? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say page 9. It's supposed to be the page before.
So that's the answer to the question. So we're going to close that.
No, it's not the answer to the question.
So do I use the whole poster board size?
Yeah, I mean, you can just call as many characteristics of what makes a good leader. Hmm? Y'all got to share your input here.
I think I have better handwriting. You think you have better handwriting?
Well, see, the other group made a handwriting analysis first to decide whose was better.
What we got?
Well, to be a good leader, first you have to be a leader.
Ah, good job.
Understanding.
Lead by example. You have to be willing to make sure.
Give about 2 more minutes.
I'm just going to put a magnetic personality, and we will just.
And y'all are going good. Y'all might beat the other groups. That's the goal. That's the goal. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, the old group has the wisdom. All right, one more minute. See how many of you guys can get down.
Strong jawline.
Yeah, hair like John.
Hair like John. Yeah, it's hard to get this kind of hair.
That's why I just go the easy route and shave it.
All right. If y'all take your list back to your seats.
Yeah, we won. Hey, we're Team Gold.
Your team gold? Huh? Your team what? Voldemort. Who's cheating? Okay. Now I want you guys to look at your list for a second. We've got Team Voldemort over here, Team Gold, and Team Jedi, right? Okay, that's what I thought I heard. All right. Okay, share some of your quotes real quick. Let's hear some of the quotes that you guys had. Go around the room and do that. Jerry, share your quote in case some people didn't know what it was.
Leadership does not always wear the harness of compromise.
Okay, Brett?
No man is good enough to govern another man without that other's consent.
All right.
Let him who would be moved to convince others first be moved to convince himself.
Okay. Now for your team, what were some things you guys came up with for what makes a great leader?
Well, dedication. The idea being a youth minister who isn't convinced that youth ministry is important isn't going to be a good youth minister. You got to be sold out to what you're leading. Firm foundation. Those are musical signs. His quote, the quote he has, I forgot who it was from. Is it oh, what me? Leadership is not always where the harness of compromise. The idea is you can't be trying to compromise all the time. You got to have a foundation, a firm foundation. So that's where that came from.
Right.
A magnetic personality. You got to be somebody who people want to follow.
Okay.
That's kind of what this.
Yeah.
The one from Abraham Lincoln. You got to have other people's consent for that follow you. A good teacher and follower of wiser people. I think a good leader is someone who was once a good follower and probably still is a good follower and someone willing to learn. Worthy of trust. We heard them say trustworthy after we came up with worthy of trust. So they must have gotten that from us. Good vision and sets worthy goals, and he made this up right before time was over.
Okay.
But time was over.
The time was up. You just kept riding.
Yeah, just kept riding.
Okay.
I'll do that much down.
So I guess a good leader finishes and follows instructions, right?
Or does whatever needs to be done.
That's
whatever needs to be done.
That's
Okay.
why we're here, to figure out what our leaders.
What about the other team? What do you guys think about their list?
I like the music.
You like the musical notes?
I like the dedication part. You have to be dedicated to what you're doing. If you're not sold out for it, then people following you aren't going to. I thought that was good.
Yeah, if you're not dedicated, and let's be honest, especially in youth ministry, a lot of times youth ministry can be looked at almost like a springboard.
Grow up to be a preacher.
Yeah, and unfortunately we deal with that mentality in the church, not maybe so much within our own group of other ministers and youth ministers, but many times the congregation. Has anybody ever had somebody say that to you, said, well, one day you'll grow up to be a really good preacher, right? Anybody ever say that to you?
I've been told I was wasting my time.
Right, and so in your role as a youth minister, dedication can be important to that role of what you're doing. Anything else you guys saw about theirs?
I thought the magnetic personality was interesting.
Like, I don't know how you meant that, but I think sometimes we think we have to have a magnetic personality.
Okay.
The reality is, you don't.
Right.
The reality, I mean, you have to have some sort of appeal to people, but a lot of times we get in the mode where I think if I'm a bigger leader, I got to be everybody's friend, everybody's got to like me. And
We struggle with that.
So that's why, I don't know what you meant by it, but I think
We struggle
somewhat
with
true,
trying
but
to,
it's
we're trying to come up with a way of saying it, but the idea is that people have to really follow it.
yeah, that's
Right.
We tried, that was,
What Abraham
couldn't
Lincoln
figure
said
out how that
too.
worked.
That's true.
And it's
Okay.
kind of interesting too, when you said that about magnetic personality, listen to what that said. One of the reasons why I changed my quote is because it was a great quote, but I didn't like the guy who said it. And when we have Patton here and Napoleon, we're talking about some of these guys, some of these leaders, they didn't have a magnetic personality. They were, in
Yeah.
fact, some of them were introverts, and some of them were disliked by most everybody.
Yeah.
But there was something about their leadership that just caused people to fall in line. It was more of an authoritative type
Right.
thing, less than a. But magnetic, I think that's a great point. But like that's kind of interesting to see that whatever context it's in,
Yeah.
depending on the individual.
Yeah, you've got charismatic leaders who not necessarily are liked by everybody, but somehow they can get people to do all kind of things. We see that in the religious world all the time, right? Jim Jones was able to get hundreds of people to kill himself by drinking poison Kool-Aid. Well, he had a charisma to him and something about him that even when you're a bad person or you might not be upholding certain ideals, you can get people to follow you. So there's something about leadership, and we're going to get into some other discussion later that kind of deals with that when it comes to what kind of leaders we want to be. Because I think it's a good point. You can be a bad leader and still have a lot of people follow you, right? And so we want to talk about how that relates to us and who we are in developing leadership in ministry. So next group, y'all got your quotes.
One says that no general can fight his battles alone. He must depend upon his lieutenants, and his success depends upon his ability to select the right man at the right place.
Okay.
While a good leader sustains momentum, a great leader increases it.
All right.
If your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader.
When I give a minister an order, I leave it to him to find the means to carry it out.
All right. Interesting quotes, aren't they? So,
Who's that?
yeah,
Napoleon.
Napoleon. Yeah. And his was, when I give an order, it needs to be done. So, what are some things you guys came up with what makes a good leader? Go ahead and read them.
Understand people following you. You gotta, if you don't understand where they're coming from or why they've elected you or what they stand for, then what good are you? By the way, y'all feel free to chip in. Trustworthy, kind of, you can't trust a leader. I feel goes without saying.
Worthy of trust.
Yeah, another way of saying it.
Willing to lead by example. If you're, as a leader, if you're not willing to get your hands dirty, if you're not willing to be on the front lines and practice what you preach, which is down the line, then what good are you? Because if you're just sitting there and barking out orders and never actually do it, then it's not going to really mean anything to people. Empower others. You've got to be that kind of. I like this. I think that goes along with my quote. If you can sustain momentum, that's good. I think you're doing a good job. But it says a good leader does that, but a great leader increases it. So you got to empower others to go out and do good as well. Got to have vision. Got to see the big picture of things. And, understand where you're going. Why don't you take the rest?
Yeah. We got practice what you preach. Get things done. Be a good communicator. Be humble. Always trying to improve self. Be a good listener. A lot of them had to do with kind of the team that's involved. There are people that are following you, but you've got to be someone that people want to follow. And if you're not humble, if you're prideful, if you're not communicating, if you're not doing these things, the people are just not going to follow you. Your team is not going to want to work for you and do the things that need to be done for y'all to be successful.
Yeah, and I like that too, because that's one thing about leadership is that having a team mentality instead of an individual mentality or on my own type mentality can make a big difference in what kind of leader you're going to be. For some of you guys who've done this for a while, maybe even worked at more than one church, which I can say I've done that. I know Ray's done that, some other things. I've been in situations to where, as a minister, I've worked with congregations and elderships where you didn't have a team environment, and it's a lot more difficult to work in that when you feel like you're constantly on your own than when you have people that support you and build you up and you work together. And so I like that idea of leadership, makes a great leader, being centered around that team environment. So anything else? Anybody else think of anything off of their list or you'd like to comment about?
I like the idea of being consistent. That's a very important thing, is that people know that when you say something, you're going to do it.
Right.
You're going to keep to your word. That's big.
Yeah.
I like the good listener part too, because people need to know that you care about their input.
Right. What's the statement we say sometimes, often, or maybe I've heard it often, that people don't care what?
How much you know.
Yeah, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So, and a lot of that comes from listening to them just as much as talking. Matter of fact, the worst trouble I get into as a married person, even to this day, and I've been married almost 19 years now. Some of y'all, how many besides Ray has been married more than or longer than I have? See, yeah. No. You're almost 19 years too, right? 18, so you're not too far behind. The biggest trouble I get into with my wife still is when she starts telling me something, and instead of listening, I start telling her what she needs to do right off. Anybody have that problem already? Some of you newly married guys that, no, not yet? Okay, yeah. Well, because listening is just important. Anything else? Let's move to the last group and listen to their list.
All right, my quote was, "Be willing to make decisions. That's the most important quality."
The general is just as good or just as bad as the troops under his command make him.
Power is the testing, the miserable life of him who wishes to be feared rather than to be loved.
Okay. What was your list you guys came up with on leadership?
We say communicate a vision. You need to be able to analyze the situations that go on. They need to be able to distinguish between facts versus feelings. They need to be able to delegate authority and be able to mentor other people into leadership roles. They need to have good instincts. They need to be willing to be held accountable. And then to take personal responsibility for what they do.
All right, anybody see anything on their list?
The first thing to do is distinguish facts over feelings, because I'm a pretty emotional guy, and but you can't always do what you feel, or especially if something happens and you're really mad or you're really passionate about it, that's not always going to be the best, cause of action. You got to go with what needs to be done, what are the facts, and go off that, and use your feelings then to go off those facts.
Were y'all talking about your own feelings, or were y'all talking about others? Because I was thinking along the lines of others. Distinguishing, with youth ministry, with the conflicts that arise, I need to be able to identify what happened, not so much just whose feelings are hurt or why they're, or how they're hurt, but what actually happens. And so I thought that's one that jumped out at me too. In fact, I kind of took out the rest of the list because I wasn't thinking about that.
Leaders need to think first. If you make an emotional reaction, sometimes it's not the right one, and so you got to think, and then feel, and then act. If you automatically just get worked up and just handle it, it may end up regretting, especially in Christian leadership.
Yeah.
Is that you got to pause and reflect and meditate before you just jump into the action.
And you guys have known me for a while. I talk about this a lot. There's a balance. You got to have a balance there. But if you have one extreme or the other, you're going to get yourself in trouble. Yeah, you got to have feelings. If you don't have feelings, you might make some decisions that are based all on facts, but you're not going to have a whole lot of people that gets back to the people that want to follow you. If they don't have a connection with you, you're in trouble.
Another one we talked about, because because time was up, I didn't write it down, but it was conflict management was another.
Yeah.
I didn't get to write it on there, but.
Yeah. Conflict management as well. All right, well, guys, I appreciate you guys doing this. A lot of good comments. And so what I want to talk about with this idea is what is leadership. First of all, you're going to see, and even I've said this already a few times, instead of saying good leaders, use the word great leadership. Because I believe there's a difference between being a good leader and a great leader. And I know for some of you guys are a little bit newer to our area, but about 2 years ago, our theme was from good to great. Y'all remember, some of y'all that were in our area-wide youth ministry, area-wides we had that as a theme, good to great. And one of the things when we talked about that was this idea of we don't want to just be good, we want to be great in our Christianity, but also that applies to good to great in our leadership. The idea came from a book called Jim Collins that wrote about business companies. And it's interesting to me, even as I've studied more about leadership, you can look at the business model, and we're going to look at a few more in just a little bit, and you can compare it to how that also plays such a, you can take that model and move it to church, family, a lot of other areas of your life, and learn from that. And what Jim Collins did was he took all these companies and looked at what made them great companies, even with their competitors and within markets that went up and down over a long period of time. And one of the first things he says in the book that it always stuck out to me when I first started reading it, was he said, we don't have, I'm paraphrasing, I'm not sure if I've got it exactly in the same order, but he said, we don't have great schools because we have good schools. We don't have great families because we have good families. We don't have great churches because we have good churches. And what happens is we get to the point where we settle for good instead of great. And what he was saying was, if you want to be a great, the person who wants to be great, they get to that good level and they go, okay, this is good, but it's not good enough. I'm going to go one step further. And I'm going to go a little bit more. And that's what makes them great. When we get to that part, we say, well, I'm good enough, then we plateau. And when you plateau, you get stale, you get rote, and it just flattens out. And so you're going to hear me say that today is, how do we develop our leadership to be a great leadership in ministry? And there's a danger for us, even as youth ministers or ministers, even volunteers, that we kind of settle for, okay, it's good enough, and we stop trying to grow in our leadership. We get to the point where, let's be honest, after a little while, you get pretty good at doing your job, and it can just become the same old. And what happens is you might have a pretty solid group, but then it just can get stale after a while. So I want you to think about that as we go through the rest of this training, is how we get from good to great in our leadership. So what is leadership? If you look in your workbooks, in your manuals, under that section, the first thing is, what is a leader? It is a position. Now what do I mean by that? You kind of said it in some of your boards earlier. Okay, you've been appointed to it. So it's a position. If it's a position, then somebody has put you in that position because they think you can do it. I mean, ideally. Now, you have people that put themselves in a position, and they might lead in certain ways for a little while. But if people don't like you, if they don't feel connected to you, for good or bad, you could be your principle could be good or bad. But if people don't put you there, then you're not really looked at as a leader. Has anybody known somebody that thinks they're a leader, but you really know they're not? Because they do a lot of barking and talking, but everybody else is rolling their eyes behind them and stuff. Well, that's not really what we're talking about. A leader is a position. Now, it can be an eldership has hired you on. You've gotten hired for that position. If you're a volunteer, somebody's asked you, say, hey, can you do this? Because they saw you doing something and say, hey, that person, they're responsible and they're committed, and some of the things you guys talked about. And so somebody puts you in that position because they see you as that person. So it's a position. It's intentional. I asked you a minute ago, how many of you guys got into ministry but you wanted to be there? It's intentional. Is anybody where they're at right now because it was unintentional? You're still sitting there going, I did not want to do this. I had to do it, right?
Unintentional, like, I was not looking for the job. It kind of came
Right.
to me.
But you want to do ministry.
Took it on. Yeah.
Right. You intentionally took it on. And so leadership is intentional. I mean, even in our churches, one of the problems we have in our churches today is we have a shortage of elderships. And this is a common problem. The guys that have the qualifications. And you say, hey, would you be an elder? Would you be a leader? Would you be a deacon? And they say, well, I just don't want that. Because I don't want that responsibility. I don't want to do it. Well, if they don't want to do it, you can call them a leader all day long, but they're not because they don't want to do it. So being a leader is intentional. You have to want to be a leader. All right? And certain circumstances in life can happen that put you there, but unless you just say, I don't want it, you're intentionally taking on that responsibility. It is having purpose. Leadership is having purpose. I think Ray Y'all's group mentioned in your list having goals. Is that what you said? Having vision, right. How many of you guys have vision statements within your ministry? Or, I mean, even if it's not written down, you've got a vision of what you want your ministry to be, or your eldership, and you have shared stories, or you've shared it with your parents, your kids. You have a purpose of what you're about. Well, that's what leadership is. Having vision. It is having vision. You have a purpose. You know what you're about. If you're a great leader, great leaders have that purpose, but then they take that purpose and turn it into a vision, and say, okay, here's my vision for what I want out of this ministry. Here's the vision that I want to try to move us to. And we talk about team. As a leader, having a vision as a team. I mentioned I've worked for some different elderships and ministries. The best congregations that I've been a part of, and I have to say Gulf Shores is one of those, is a group of leaders that together we share a common purpose and vision that we see that we want the church to be. And it really does help. And so you have to have that if you're going to have great leaders and great leadership. It's taking responsibility. Some of these, again, have been mentioned that you guys came up with. It's taking responsibility. Do we know any leaders that lead but they don't take responsibility when things go bad? We're not going to get into politics today. But, I mean, don't we see that from time to time? Well, even in the church, we see some things. Well, one of the struggles that if you talk to some ministers and youth ministers at different events, sometimes they'll say, I just don't feel like my eldership backs me up, or I don't feel like my parents back me up, and that's hard, right? Because they don't take responsibility. Even ministers who get into the point where they don't take responsibility for their actions, good or bad, mostly bad, right? We like to take responsibility for the good things. But when bad things come along, a good leader stands up and says, hey, my fault, responsibility, I'm the one leading the ship, or captaining the ship, and I'm going to take responsibility for that. And also, I'm going to try to work through it. I'm going to try to fix it if you allow me to. So it's taking responsibility. It's having character. And this we're going to talk about in just a few minutes. Goes back to what we're talking about good and bad leaders. Was Hitler a good leader? That's a good question, isn't it? He was a very good leader. Ethically and morally, was he a good leader? Well, now we're talking about a different question. His character was what the problem was. But as far as a leader, he had a charisma to him. He had a personality that was infectious, that people somehow would do things that they knew they shouldn't, but he was able to convince them and influence them. Well, I mentioned Jim Jones. There's others. We could go on a list of people even today that their character's off, but they're good leaders. They're maybe some great leaders, but they're missing that character. They're missing that ethical and moral response. So from what we're talking about is what is a great leader, a spiritual leader, has to be somebody who has character. And we'll talk about that more in a second. It is serving. It is serving. If you want to be a great leader, you've got to be willing to serve, right? We've all seen leaders that don't serve, but they like to tell you what to do, but they don't do it themselves. And a great leader is somebody that'll get their hands dirty, somebody that will go and serve. And it's a behavior. Now, somebody give me some thoughts on this one. It's a behavior. Great leadership is a behavior. What do I mean by that?
Do you mean kind of lifestyle?
Okay. Sure. Sure.
It's not something you do on occasion. It's the way you live.
Right.
Is that what you're
Yeah. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Anybody else want to elaborate on that?
Maybe when I think of behavior, obviously the word behave, so I would think about going kind of what Brett said about a lifestyle thing, but you can't turn leadership on and off.
Mhm.
If you're a leader, you're a leader, and that's just
Right.
the way it is. You can't go, okay, I'm just not going to lead right now, I'm not going to lead today. It's everything you do.
Right.
It affects everything.
Leadership needs to be personal.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be one line. You're not gonna preach, at church and then get home for a family devotional and set up your podium.
Right.
It's gonna be different. It's still gonna be leading. That's going to be different in all facets.
Right.
So.
Right. And the behavior we're talking about is, it is that. It's, you lead, you don't turn it off and on. You lead with your life. The example I think about with behavior is, when I'm here in Gulf Shores, and I know people know me as the minister at the Gulf Shores Church of Christ, and when I'm doing youth events or at the school, and then they see Ray and I in that role here in town, well, if I drive over to Mobile, I'm not going to go hanging out in the bars and doing things because I'm not in the same city, or when I go on vacation, I'm not going to be doing things that I shouldn't be doing somewhere else because, well, they don't know me as the minister there. What it is my behavior is I'm a leader, I'm a spiritual leader, no matter where I'm at. And so that influences how I act everywhere I go.
Behavior and character combined.
Yes. A very good point. Behavior and character combined with that. So that's what leadership is. So I want us to look at the 3C concept of leadership in this next section. This is something that I've told you, you can take some business models. Some of you might recognize this if you've ever heard Nathan Meller. I took this from him, Dr. Nathan Meller that spoke at Gulf. And one of the things he talks about is the 3C concept. And it really does apply when you think about, and when we use it in our spiritual lives too. So what we're going to do is we're going to break up into the same groups. And what I want us to do with this is look at page 9 again. Okay? I want you to think about for yourselves developing a leadership skills plan. How do you guys have a plan for your own leadership? You ever looked at, kind of thought about what are some things that I need to work on or can use in my leadership? Well, if not, we're going to do a little exercise that I want you to break up in your groups, and you're going to look through this sheet. And what we're going to do is, once you look at the leadership skills, look on page 9. There's several of them there. You might want to add some of the ones you put on your poster boards earlier and use those. And then what I want you to do is I want you to pick out 3 of those leadership skills and that you feel like you need to work on, or that you can work on. And I want you to fill out that chart. The chart says leadership skills to improve, growth objectives for each skill, activities, people who can help me with those, indicators of success, and then the timeline. And just kind of answers. I gave you an example. If you look down there, for example, your growth objective for each skill. Your leadership skill might be to create vision. We talked about vision. As a leader, you might say, I really haven't really thought about my vision for my ministry. I thought about my vision for my own personal leadership. So that's something you want to work on. Well, what you're going to do is, how can I grow in that? Well, to create a vision statement for my youth program. Maybe I don't have one. Maybe I need. Well, then the activities. What am I going to do to create that? Well, I'm going to ask parents, elders, teens for honest feedback. Then from that, I'm going to form a vision team. The people who can help me with this, well, my elders, my deacons, my parents, other ministers, they can help me do this. Indicators of success, increase in direction, focus is improved. That's what's going to help me. And then the timeline. What can be my timeline for this? I'm going to get feedback within 3 weeks. I'm going to, then after that, put together, whatever it might be, this is for you to kind of figure out. And so once you get together with your teams, kind of talk about it, and then start filling these out amongst yourselves. So anybody got any questions? Any questions?
Can you maybe define a term here?
Yeah.
Competency.
What's that again?
Train for competency.
Right. Train for competency. Knowing what you're doing. You know, going to youth workshops, youth ministry workshops, the summit, the lectureships, things like that.
I don't know if you're talking about me or you're talking about those.
Yeah. So, all right. Any other questions?
Leadership skills to improve, are we doing that as a group or individually?
Yeah, talk about some of those skills. If there's any you think that need to be added to this list, look at those. Maybe discuss some things that you need to work on yourself. Use some time to discuss with each other about what's going on in your life of leadership, things that you want to work on, things that you feel are needed, and then start filling this out and putting this together. And so we'll spend about 10 minutes letting you do that, and then we'll come back and answer some of these questions. Let's do that right now.
Start by picking one.
I like that. Honestly, I don't have to do
So we can.
I'm just saying, that's good.
What about establish team? Delegating authority. So getting other people involved. To me, that goes. So that's my big three.
All right, let's do establishing team. And I'm thinking like,
Not so much. I was thinking more.
like I know personally I do a really bad job empowering other people to help be a part of it. I just kind of like, well, I do myself. So that's what I, when I read that, that's what I think.
This is more things I need to work on, but I'm thinking of other people.
It's a consistency thing.
What was that that you put down?
My group's had different boards than it's been.
Anybody or parents?
It's our team. It's our leaders.
So it's not all.
I don't know if y'all maybe Dave Riker, he came into the workshop and we didn't see the stuff he did, but I mean, not that it wasn't good, it was very good. I just, just am lazy, I guess, but what he did was he like created like a model for like a leadership team, so there was like parents and students in the youth group, and so the way that they like would plan events, like he would say, all right, every month this team would meet and they would come up with something, but I don't really want to say create another team, but really that's I guess just creating some sort of a team chart that takes some sort of responsibility. I don't want to say completely out of your hands, but
I got three that kind of jumped out.
give them something
One of them's
and just be supportive of that, if that makes sense.
I think that's like a consistent thing, I'm gonna tell you what.
So you kind of delegate certain decisions.
Yeah, I would say like intentional delegation.
The thing that I've
That's what CEO, ATI, the factions.
But to me, it's a heavy focus on there's a group that's.
so I can't apply this quite yet.
I mean,
Yes,
In my mind, that's the main thing. You need to make sure if you never copy and paste.
that's what David said. But you're talking about youth activity, really just making some excuses to have kids around. Things don't make
Let's do this. Which to me, that's what it does. Is it tells everybody how to be.
What I've been
This is still different.
So like ministry ownership.
focused on trying to relationships with them. So you need to have balance with and
Kansas City Hills, we pay them to come down, and it's really, really good. But
so I've been doing
that's where I met him. You know that.
and they're
I don't know.
lovely.
We just we kind of established a friendship.
It's like plan effectively. Probably
He was a big guy for you.
unless you're a sick person, it's probably easy.
He attended like a small church called Sakilla down in a secular job. He's super, super smart. Like, I mean, like I said, he's still was wise, but he's, I mean, man, it's definitely was worth it. I didn't have enough. If you were going to
Like 3 or 4 minutes,
I
and
would
we'll
have like a strategy of how
talk about what you guys have.
like immediately what it is.
After every class,
It's really good.
I
And
kind
the
of
thing that's neat about it, it sounds so bad, but it takes a lot, it would take a lot of work off you. Because it's all about,
I'll even ask some of these.
it's all about like having kids actually and adults take what I don't think they're like implant it themselves and you already go through all the basically saying, hey, here it is for, or here it is for, here's what we've talked about. It's pretty cool. And it's going to take work on communities. We need to focus on being this.
Before, after, and during.
I think that it kind of depends. I think that, you know, this is really good how this is done, but I think you set like a launch point, and then you have like
I need to set up some trustworthy.
I think Alec directly after each activity is good to be pretty soon after that. So let's talk about how it went.
What is this?
As you guys are finishing up on these charts and stuff, let's go ahead and take like a 5-minute break if you need to go to the bathroom before we get started with the next section.
Are you saying we're done?
No, I'm saying that if you need to.
We're done with this.
Oh, yeah, if you want to take like a 5-minute break, get some coffee, something.
basically I hope because if there's something that I don't like, or like pretty much on same page, basically, he'll be the person who kind of acts like he's not a jerk. He's the one like, look, you know, this is, think about this for a second, you know.
What was important about like mom, he can do that now. Always
Sorry,
his job in a way that
Yeah, exactly. And he says that, he's like, they can't fire her. I'll say what I want to say. And it's just cool because it's like I have a buffer, if that makes sense. But that's why I would hear his kids. Well, no, but I mean, he's been there longer. He's respected super well within the eldership within the congregation. So it's just kind of like they trust him. I mean, he's so smart, so like level-headed. It's cool. Like I don't know. I've known he's my first ever decent, but it's the youth deacon I've ever had. It helped a lot that.
We did one of those.
Yeah, like I said, my kind of, I guess, second out of four, three elders, 2 of them are dads.
All right, guys, let's go ahead and answer these questions, the follow-up questions for this assignment. We'll do this next section and then we'll take a break before we get to sections. On page 8, make sure you guys have the same page. Page 8, there's some follow-up questions in your manual that we're looking at. As you guys did your chart, I was walking around, I saw you guys were really talking about some of you guys did one really good one, some of you got 3 down pretty quick, and as you're filling in your chart. As you looked at your leadership skills, the list of the leadership skills, number 1 follow-up question says, what leadership skills did you or your group add, if any, to the list? Did you guys add any of those skills? Pretty much.
There's plenty to think about. My brain's not very big.
There's quite a bit of them. So, anybody add anything?
I added to our list empowering others.
Okay.
It fit with a lot. It was a big thing on the poster.
Yeah.
It fit with a lot of what we were talking
Okay, so if y'all want to take a pen and write that in, you can. Empowering others is one that they added.
added encouragement.
Okay, that put encouragement on there. That was one of the ones he added, encouragement. The second question is, what was the hardest or easiest part of selecting your 3 skills? As you selected your own personal skills, what was the hardest or easiest part of that?
For mine was easy, so maybe that was a bad sign. Because there's indicators that out of 3 areas I was able to come up quickly.
Okay. All right.
The easy part was there was plenty of viable options for those 3 spots. The hard part was narrowing down to 3.
Okay. Who had a hard time narrowing down their 3? All right. And look at your 3. What were some of the things you guys put on yours, if you don't mind sharing them? You want to share what you put?
I put build trust on mine.
Okay.
Because where I'm at, as a city, we've had 3 or 4, 5 youth ministers in as many years. And for me, being new, and this is my first time in youth ministry, leaving a secular job, that's what I want to come in and establish. Build trust to ultimately grow a youth group.
Right.
And that's kind of one of my indicators of success was a growing youth group and having a relationship with students.
Okay. That's very good.
We talked about it in our group about the build trust point, but we talked about, I guess, the differences between our 2 places. At Central, we've been without really a youth minister for a long time, and so the people there are like they're wanting trust so bad they're willing to give it immediately.
Right.
And so it's like I need to be careful to maintain. It's not to build, but to maintain and to do well.
That's a good point. The accountability.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else? Those are good points.
Kind of empower others. You guys have that list. I've circled or underlined coach others, and that's kind of what I was thinking was everyone's empowering others. Because I feel like as a youth minister, if I'm 100% successful in my youth ministry in 10 years, my job ain't even needed. Because other people will, if families were doing their jobs, we ministry would do this. And that's part of my goal from the work is to empower others to take ownership in our young people.
All right. Very good.
I think it's easier to make the list. It's harder to figure out how you're going to fix it. You know, to me, it's like we were talking about. One of them, I added delegate authority, and we've had that on our chart. And the problem is, like I said, you evaluate your plate. You look at what's on your plate, but there's a reason why it's on my plate, because nobody else will do it. And so it's hard to delegate to somebody else when you've accepted it and nobody else wants it. You can't really train anybody. Nobody wants to have a part of it. So that's harder, is figuring out a timeline and how can I succeed when there's no light at the end of the tunnel. In other words.
Yeah, anybody else feel that way? I think that, yeah. And that's one of the things I want this activity to kind of get you thinking about your own leadership and how you're impacted by trying to move forward. You know, what you need to do in that.
One thing about the delegation thing, though, is if you're trying to find someone to delegate to and no one wants to, and you don't want it either, and that sometimes the leader gets to say, well, do we really need to do this?
Yeah.
And you have to decide that this is something.
Yeah, and hang on, because that's going to be one of the things we're going to talk about in the last section today. Is we're going to talk about some of that as a leader. Sometimes we get a lot of things on our plate, and our time gets used up. That if we're not careful, we can start finding ourselves running circles around that aren't as important. How do we manage our time? So hold on to that for a little bit later. The third question says, how do you think this activity can help you in improving your leadership skills? Why did I have you do this? Why did this activity, did I choose this activity for you guys to think about your leadership skills? How can this help?
I don't know, but that chart's awesome.
Why?
Well, because it helps me to put onto, I guess, make a firm plan, something to I can look at, something I can see, something I can measure.
Exactly.
And
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the first step of solving any problem is identifying the good outcome.
Yeah.
So making you aware of areas you need improvement.
This is one of the things that I think that we get into, and I know I see it a lot, and especially as I look at leadership and study it more, one of the things that has come out to me more and more is that I spend a lot of time thinking and talking about what I need to do, and sometimes I can even get in around our youth ministry meetings or a lectureship, we sit around a table, and I can start complaining about things and talk about all the problems and this leadership and this problem, that problem, and yet I never really sit down and actually write out a plan. And so how can I keep complaining about things not happening or things being slow or are these parents here or those parents there and this eldership stuff if I don't first at least sit down and have a plan to say, okay, here's my vision, here's what I need to do to get it accomplished, and have something that I can measure. Brett said, I think, good. If guys, in our leadership, in our development as ministers, if you haven't thought about and sat down and written down a plan, or at least have something on paper that you can measure, then you're going to run circles. And you're going to get frustrated. And frustration leads to burnout. And burnout leads to just, a lot of other negative things that happen in your life. And really, this is going to go on again to the next section, talking about our time management. But it's writing something down that you can say, okay, here's what I need to work on, or here's some things that I need to really try to focus in on. And so let me write down how I'm going to accomplish it. I need to take this step, and this step. How many of you guys have already had this happen? Even some of you newer guys, where you've got this plan or vision, you haven't really written it down, but you then get in the middle of it and you kind of get lost or you get overwhelmed. You think, oh, what do I do now? I see what I want and I did, but I don't know what to do. You just try to hey, that's it. Because how many of you guys claim to be or are, but even if you maybe not have never been diagnosed, you still claim it, are ADD or ADHD? It's amazing how many ministers. It's amazing how many ministers fall into that category, or how many ADD or ADHD people become ministers. Because we're great at the thoughts and visions and going, oh, I like this idea. Well, I like this idea over here, and this idea too. But we never write anything down. We never organize our thoughts into a form to where pretty soon we're burning our candle at both ends. And so that's why I want you to look at this activity and think about it. Yeah.
Kind of along that line, about 2 weeks ago, to share a personal story, about 2 weeks ago, I started listening to the Ministry Bits podcast. I don't know if any of y'all listen to that.
Yeah.
It's basically all about technology and ministry. And I'm like a binge podcaster, so I listen to a ton at one time. And at first I was like, man, this is a great idea, I need to use that. And then at 2 hours later, you know, 4 or 5 episodes in, I realized how overwhelmed I was. And then it worked opposite, and I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Because I was like, this is impossible. I can't do all this stuff right now. You know, so I have to take it one at a time, write it down, and things like that.
I think that's what they're called bits.
Yeah, they are called bits.
They're called bits,
I don't
right.
need to consume so many. So.
Well, and that's important because this leads to the last question in this section. The 3C concept is really quick. This section's the shortest, and then we'll take a break and then finish up the last 2 sections. How do these leadership skills relate to character, competence, and consistency? All right, that's what we talked about competence a second ago. Right? How do these leadership skills relate to character, competence, and consistency? What's competence we talked about? What is competence? Knowing what you're doing.
Being able to do it well.
Okay, and being able to do it well. And consistency is what? Over a period of time, right? I mean, all of us can do something well the first time, or you know, we can plan one event and do it really well. But what about that consistency? How about in ministry in general? I mean, our first year, and for some of you guys that are new to youth ministry, maybe your first position, it's real easy to be that honeymoon stage, we call it, right? Any job's got a honeymoon stage. And everybody loves you for that first year, maybe 2 if you're good.
If you want to extend it, have a baby.
If you want to extend have a baby, where they love you again, but they love your baby, not so much you. But I mean, that's easy. But what happens after the honeymoon stage is over and the newness wears off, like anything else, that's when you see what you're really made of. And that's where the consistency comes in. Well, that's why I want to talk about the 3C concept that Nathan talked about with companies. And it really applies to church work too. And we actually talked about this a little bit when he was here, was you have character, you have competence, and you have the consistency. And one of the things he said was, and you can watch a YouTube video he has, he talks more about it, but it's 18 minutes long, so didn't have time to put it in here. But he talks about character and competence, and when he's talking about businesses, he says, you know, it's funny how we hire for competence, but we fire over character. When you think of the business world, and well, the church world too, let's be honest. You get hired for your competence. We do our resumes, we say, okay, look what great things I've accomplished in my degree and my wisdom and my knowledge or whatever it is, and people will say, okay, we're going to hire for that. And then what happens is you get the person in and maybe their character isn't what you thought it was going to be. And so you end up getting fired because you don't have the character to match your competence. And so what he was saying is, again, talking with companies, trying to encourage companies to hire for character with competence. Look just as much as the character with competence. Well, guys, how does that apply to us? What can we pull off of that could fit for what we do?
That's what we're striving for.
Okay, that's what we're striving for. Yeah. It means that character is just as important to us, right? More important, I'll say, because as spiritual leaders, our character is everything, isn't it? And so we have to have godly character. So what are some character traits you can think of that we need to have as leaders? Trustworthy.
Worthy of trust.
Yeah, worthy of trust.
Humility.
Right, humility. All the things you guys have already been mentioning, right?
Even if you're telling your teens that they need to go home and read their Bible, you should probably be going home and reading your Bible.
Yeah. Yeah. Twice as much. Has anybody ever had this problem just asking. I'm sure none of you have this problem. That your Bible study mainly consists of trying to plan lessons out instead of personal study for just yourself. I mean, that's the worst thing that I find myself doing is I get a lot of Bible study in, but very little of it's really for me. Now I like to tell people, well, I learn just as much by doing it than they get out of it. And that might be true to some extent, but the problem is we get into that mindset that we are trying to do lessons all the time, that everything becomes a Devo. Everything becomes a lesson for somebody else.
And if you're 29 years old and are getting the same food as a teenager is getting,
Right. Right. And that can affect your character. Do people see the real you? Well, you might fool some people for a little while, but again, that's that longevity comes out. And that's why when Nathan and I were talking when he was down here for golf, I was talking about this model, and I said, it's funny that our character, we have to have godly character. We have to have this character so that our competence, so we can be consistent. I think everybody school with that went into ministry, or somebody that was your youth minister, somebody that you know as a minister, has lost their job as a minister or has gotten burned out because they couldn't stay consistent, and it almost always goes back to character.
And I think that's something that we need to talk about more. We've said a lot about competency and character, but when it comes to the consistency part, I know a lot of youth ministers and ministers that are great spiritual men, and they're completely competent at doing the job, but it's little spurts, it's church camp, it's a Devo once a month, it's occasionally they have a really good class, occasionally they have a really good sermon, and the consistency's not there, both with what they do and also in their own individual life, which goes back to your personal walk with God, your prayer time, your devotion, your meditation. And that's why things like this are important for us to come back together and say, what can I do to be more consistent? And make it work on a daily basis, not just have go to a lectureship or, listen to a podcast and go, man, I'm ready to go. And then, in 2 weeks you've forgotten everything you learned.
Yeah, and then funny that we get onto our teens about that stuff. When you leave camp, don't leave camp and forget everything, and yet we can get in the same rut. And we can...
I like what you said kind of talking about the spiritual eyes and lows. Clark Sims challenged us one time at exposure to use the mountaintop experience with the roller coaster, a spiritual high, a spiritual low. He said it's a valley. But use the spiritual high to prepare for the valley. And I think that kind of implements the idea of consistency, where it's not that I'm on a ride, I'm in a battle.
Yeah.
And the mountaintop experience may be a time of relaxation and building strength, and the valley's the battle. And instead of it being a ride you're on, you kind of take control of it, and you're consistent in your fighting.
That's a good point.
People only want the mountaintop.
Yeah. So that, your poster board, you said fact versus feeling. If we just go by feeling all the time, then the ups and downs are going to make us very inconsistent, aren't they? If we're all about feeling, and our ministry and who we are as leaders is all about how we feel about our position and what's going on in our lives, and we don't keep that fact, which is what? What would be our fact? What would be the fact in ministry? The fact is you have highs and lows. The fact is not everything's always going to be a high. That there's another fact that things will get better, but the thing is, if we're not thinking about the facts and we're just thinking about the emotions and the feelings, then the ups and downs are going to make us very inconsistent. And so we have to have, again, that balance in there. But the character plus competence, having godly character, plus using our knowledge and our skills that we learn through doing, and I'm hoping this is something that we're doing that with, but when you go to workshops, lectureships, continuing education programs that are offered, or even your own personal study, that helps keep that competence level high, but your character with the competence is going to keep you consistent in your leadership. And I think that's very important. That's why I love that model, because I think it's just a very practical, basic model. That if we just think about it, that's why I want to put in your books and keep that, look back at it and say, how's my character doing? Do a character checkup and see how you're doing. That's going to help you stay consistent in your ministry. Not only that, it's going to help you stay consistent as a husband, as a father, as a church leader. Any aspect of your life, you can plug this in and it works. I love it. So, with that said, let's take about a 5-minute break, and then I've got the next 2 sections deal with the book that you have in front of you, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Next section is my favorite section to talk about because it's just, well, didn't you just ruin your book? So it's one of the best sections to me on leadership. So let's take about 5 minutes, go to the bathroom, whatever, and then we'll start back up. I want to try to get us finished as close to 12:15 as possible so we can get out and get to lunch, because I know that's what you want. But let me tell you guys this section here, I probably have mentioned this just in passing to some of you about this book, but this is one of the reasons I wanted you guys to have your own copy, that I went and bought you a copy. This is one of my favorite books that I've read about leadership recently. It's called Leadership and Self-Deception. This next section is taken out of this book. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Arbinger Institute, but they have some other books, The Anatomy of Peace. I know at one of our past youth ministers meetings, Eric had mentioned that book, and I've got it as well. I haven't read it yet. But they do some different books that do a lot of things on leadership. This book is written kind of as a story. It's kind of a storybook. But it's about a fictitious company. Some of the companies in here are real companies that they talk about as examples. But it's about a manager who's working for a company, and the people, the CEOs in that company, call him in because he's got a leadership issue. And so it's kind of this walking him through, training him how to be a better leader. But one of the things they talk about is this idea of being in the box as a manager, as a leader. And what he notices is that he takes these principles and it starts helping him fix his marriage. It starts helping him do a lot of other things because he takes principles out of this book. But as you read it, it's just really got a lot of meat to it, a lot of good things. And so I'm going to kind of do a summation of those things that I want to talk about because I think it fits really well to leadership. And so take this book, read it, but a lot of things I'm going to talk about in this next section come straight out of this book. So let's get started with the section 3. If you have your workbooks, you can open up to that. First of all, when you hear the idea of getting out of the box, what do you think the box is? Okay, comfort zone. All right. The norm. All right. Let me tell you a story that he starts off with. He starts talking about this idea of being in a box as leaders. And I want you to think about your spiritual leadership for a minute of being in a box. How many guys see yourself as in a box as a leader? I didn't until I read this book, to be honest. And then I started thinking, okay, maybe I'm more in the box than I thought I was. And what he starts talking about, this idea of self-deception. How do we get in the box as a leader? And I think what you're going to find as we talk about this, I'm going to give you a few stories that they use and maybe even some own personal stories. You might start thinking of your own stories that can fit. But he says that you get in the box because of this idea of self-deception. And it's a struggle for any leader. Self-deception is the inability to see that one has a problem. All right? It's the inability to see that you have a problem at all. That's self-deception. You don't think you even have a problem. Matter of fact, you think as a leader, you are a great leader. It's everybody else has the problem. Know anybody like that? You ever felt that way? Okay, now you're starting to see where I'm going with this. And so that's what this book starts talking about, is it's the idea of self-deception. I'm not the problem, you are. Now, how many married guys in here? You ever deal with that at home? Right? I've got a teenager that lives with me, not one that I just work with. Okay? It's never her fault. Just like it's never my fault. And we can butt heads over that kind of stuff because I get in the box even when I'm dealing with my home life. In my marriage, I can get in that box. And so that's what the self-deception is being in a box. And it starts with a feeling. And what he does is he starts talking about having a feeling, and that feeling is to do something good, and then going against that feeling. Okay? Here's an example. How many of you guys have been on a plane before? You ever been on a plane sitting there? I fly Southwest a lot when I fly anywhere. Just simple, easy to use. I like them. But one of the things they do is you just get on and you sit wherever you want to sit. In the book, they talk about this idea of sitting in a plane and sitting there. Have you ever been on one of those kind of flights where somebody starts walking by and you've got kind of your leg up because you don't really want anybody sitting next to you? Right? Have you done that? Okay. You do that at church, okay? You got your leg, even at church, you got your leg up because you don't want the person to come by. And he's talking about how as he's sitting there watching these people come by, he's not wanting them to sit there. And yet this person comes by who needs an older lady having her bags, trying to find a place to sit, and it's crowded in the plane. And the first feeling is to what? Help. Maybe I should help her to let her sit down. But then decides to what? Y'all been there. What? Ignore, right? Or to act like, oh, I get bigger all of a sudden. Not that I need any help, but sometimes when you're sitting in those planes, you want kind of your own room. You kind of spread out. I put my shoulders out, my arms on both armrests, because I'm non-verbally telling people, you're going to sit next to me, you're not going to have a lot of room. So hopefully they'll see that and kind of move on. And yet, we're talking about having that first feeling of doing the right thing, but then going against your feeling and doing the wrong thing. Think about in ministry. Have you ever had that one kid that you think, man, I really need to ask him how their day is or see what's going on with them? But then in your mind you go, oh yeah, but if I ask them, good grief, I'm going to have to deal with all their stuff. And I just don't have time for that right now. Maybe he's a member. Oh, please don't come to my office right now and want to talk to me because I just don't want to handle it. And so your first feeling is doing the right thing, but then you go against that. And that's what he's talking about, this idea of being in the box. So here's another illustration that I really related with. And so this is out of the book, but it's also my own personal experience too. Those who have kids, you probably will relate with this as well. What he says is that you have this feeling. For example, your child is crying and you want to help your wife out. So let's paint this picture. 2, 3 in the morning, you've got a newborn baby. And that baby wakes up, a couple months old, starts crying. Your first thought is, let me get up and go help. Take care of the baby so my wife, who's been with the baby all day while I've been at work, can get some sleep and she can sleep in. So what's the feeling? What's the thought? What's the first thought, the feeling you have? To help, right? That's the idea. Your first thought is, oh, baby's crying, my child, let me get up and help my wife because she's been with the baby all day and go take care of it. Has anybody done that? Huh? No. Well, but instead of doing what you thought you're supposed to do, it leads to a choice. What is the choice? If you're looking in your book, your choice. You have a choice to honor your feeling, which would be, you know what, I'm going to get up, go take care of my child, so my wife can sleep. Now, if you do that, what's going to happen?
Happy wife, happy life.
Exactly. Right? Happy wife, happy life. Because your wife, do you think she's going to hate you for that? No. If you honor the feeling that you had, the right feeling to do the right thing, it really just stops there. You honor it, and therefore, everything's good. You honor that feeling to do the right thing. your wife's going to be happy, your baby's taken care of, you've been the good father, there's no resentment, there's no hostility there, anything like that. Or you can choose to betray it, which is the definition of self-betrayal. Self-betrayal is going against what you know you should do. When you betray yourself, you have a feeling to do what's right, but you instead go against it. And so what he says in the book is, when he's using this example, he's using an example about him doing that. He laid there and thought, I can get up and help my wife, but, I've worked all day myself. I'm tired, and I'm the one who's working and making the money, and I really need my sleep because I've got to go meet with clients. I've got all kind of things to do at the office, and so I'm going to lay here and just pretend that I don't hear it, right? I'm going to act like I'm still sleeping, that I don't hear it, and that way she'll get up. Well, he says then the longer he laid there waiting, the more she sat there, what did he start thinking? Anybody do this, by the way? Do the fathers wrong? I did it. You sit there and act like you're sleeping. Why are we doing that? What are you hoping happens?
You're rationalizing in your mind. Number one, the baby doesn't want you.
Yeah.
They want the mama, especially if they're nursing.
Sure.
Second of all, again, you've got the job. She's staying home. You should get the rest. And so you rationalize in your mind, I'm actually doing both the mom and the baby a favor by getting my rest.
Yeah.
And so you rationalize. That's just the way it is.
So you rationalize.
I have 3 boys. I went through it. And I laid there.
Yeah. So you rationalize.
The next morning, I did hear you, and I didn't want to get up. I feel your pain, but I just felt like it was best for everybody.
Did you explain to them that just shut up and go to sleep?
Yeah. So then what? But then what happens? You rationalize. What else? What else happens?
Guilt.
Okay, guilt.
I'm a little bit. I haven't been there because we actually communicate, and one of us gets up. I usually do that.
Right.
Anyway, it's true, actually, true story.
Leadership is humble, isn't it?
But I can see that would probably become almost a battle. Like, I ain't getting up now.
Mm-hmm.
I've been laying here this long. It's almost like a pride thing. I ain't getting up. You get up.
Yeah. And
Also, you get annoyed with each other because it's a game of chicken. Who's going to get up first?
Exactly.
And it's like, well, I'm annoyed with you because you're not getting up. Like, why do I have to get up? I got up last night. Or you just kind of go back and
right. And that's what leads into this. That's what leads into this self-betrayal, and that's what also leads into when we get ourselves in the box. Then everything that happens because we betrayed ourselves is a product of our bad decision that then gets carried out into the way we see everybody else. And we'll talk about that more in a second. But I want to look at what is self-betrayal. Self-betrayal is the act contrary to what I feel I should do for another. All right, that's 1. 2, when I betray myself, I begin to see the world in a way that justifies my self-betrayal. See, when I betray myself, I start rationalizing. I start seeing the world around me, so everything justifies why I made the decision I made. Well, look, I'm not getting up because even though I should do the right thing, but if I don't get my sleep, then I'm going to be terrible tomorrow at work, and my work is what keeps the food on the table and pays for all the formula and all the diapers and everything we do. And so you start rationalizing and justifying your self-betrayal. When I see the world in a self-justifying way, my view of reality becomes distorted. Reality becomes distorted. That baby doesn't want me, it wants mom. She's breastfeeding. Needs that milk, and I have nothing to offer. Well, is that true? No. Partially maybe in some of it, but the idea is that baby wants to be picked up. It might be they just need a diaper change, But we will make the reality become distorted through that. When I betray myself, I enter the box. I've put myself in the box. Instead of doing the right thing and honoring that feeling to do what I should have done in the beginning, when I betray myself, I stick myself in a box. And then over time, certain boxes become characteristic of me. And I carry them with me. And what the writers of this book are saying is, once I put myself in that box, those boxes then become who I am. And then everybody else around me sees me as a leader who is in a box. Because I shut myself up in that box. Because I relate to everybody else around me from the box. And I'm going to talk about what that means in just a second. 6, by being in the box, I provoke others to be in the box. See, once I put myself in the box, then I think of everybody else as being in a box too. And so I treat them as they're in a box. And what they say is when you do that, you stop seeing people as people. Listen to this one. And you see people as objects. Why does that make a difference? When you stop seeing people as people because you put yourself in a box and you see others as being in boxes, it causes you to see them as objects instead of people. How does that change us as leaders and affect our leadership?
Because it gets back to facts over feelings. You focus only on the facts and you leave the emotional part out of it. You're not thinking about your wife's exhaustion. You're not thinking about she's done this for the last 17 nights in a row. You know? You're not thinking about the child, that every night you get up with that child and spend time holding that child. That's a memory, even though it's a short-term memory.
Yeah.
It's a memory that they're going to have of their father being there when they need them.
Right.
So you throw out all that feeling and emotion, and you're just on the fact of I've got to get my rest, and she's the one who can fix it. And
right.
then when you become, the 40-year-old father, looking back, going, I should have got up those nights. Both for my wife and for my children, but also for me to have said I had some kind of participation.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. The 7 is this. In the box, we invite mutual mistreatment. Look at that. We invite mutual mistreatment and obtain mutual justification. We collide in giving each other reason to stay in the box. So once I get in the box and I start seeing people as objects and start putting them in a box, then I invite this mistreatment of back and forth to where it's just a back and forth. And so when I have a leadership, my leadership becomes nothing but leading from a box, then I see that in everything I do. It gives me reason to stay in the box because now I have a reason for all the bad things and all the negative things that happen to me. They're not my fault. They're somebody else's fault. Well, let's think about that for a minute. Let's talk about church. Let's get away from the idea of being at home as a father with a kid, not getting up. How can we apply this to church, to our jobs, as ministers? What are some things that can put us in a box?
When you're like trying to counsel or talk to your student, I guess one of the, you can bring it back to, a while back we talked about, I'm the one unmarried guy here. Even if my fiance, she's upset, and I try to offer her, a list of facts why she shouldn't be upset, that never makes her not upset. Never works. And it's the same with the student. If you're going to offer them a list of facts of why they shouldn't feel upset about what they've done or why what they've done is okay or not okay, you've effectively done nothing.
Yeah.
You've treated them as though they are some kind of formulated object that you can plug in a code and fix the issue.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Well, what else?
I think sometimes we can create this box when we start, and I don't think it's a bad thing to have a job description, but when we create these job descriptions, and then we say, this is who I am, what I'm going to do, I'm not going to do anything outside this job description.
Yeah.
That's not what I was hired to do, I'm not doing that. And so, so then we create essentially this box in which we say, this is what I'm doing, that's it.
Yeah, and what happens too when the job description are they, let's just say it, you have an eldership that comes and says, hey, we want you to do this. I don't want to do that. Well, we didn't ask you that, we want you to do this. Well, then your feelings then become, if you're in the box, you start leading from that idea, is your heart really into what you're doing? Well, I'm doing this because the others told me how to do it. And so that's our attitude. When I'm in the box, it's about, I see things as objects, not people or things of importance that I'm doing the work of God anymore. It's more about, I'm doing something I don't want to do. See, when we're in the box, we become centered around ourselves instead of other people. We become objective. And that's an issue. And so how do we get out of that box? Well, let's look at this first. In self-betrayal, here's how I start to see myself when I get in that box. Okay, going back to the example of the father, I start seeing myself as the victim. When I betray myself and don't go with my first feeling of doing the right thing, I start thinking of myself as the victim. Why is my wife not getting up? She's really not sleeping now. Doesn't she know that I've been working all day? It's all about me. It no longer becomes about the baby needing to change, getting changed or fed or whatever. It becomes about me. I'm the victim. I'm the hardworking one. I'm the one who's been working hard. You forget about the wife who stayed home with the crying baby all day, who might have colic or teething or whatever, who's changed all the diapers that day, who couldn't get a nap because every time she tried to lay down to sleep, the baby woke up. And so their schedules are off and she's had a rough day. Oh, you don't think about that. You think about, I've worked hard all day because I had to go to my office in a quiet environment probably for some of us, even if it's hectic. And I might have even gone to lunch with my friends and had a great hour of lunch where I hung out at our business meeting. But I've been with adults all day and my wife's been sitting there with kids. So I'm the hardworking one. I start seeing myself as more important. I start seeing myself as fair. Hey, this is only fair. It's fair that she gets up because of all the things I'm doing. I'm the sensitive one. Isn't that interesting? I'm a good dad because I'm letting the baby sleep because the mama needs to get up and take care of him. I'm a good dad because I'm the one who's going to get up in the morning and go work and bring the money home to pay for the food and to provide for my kids. And I'm being a good dad, so I see myself as that role. I can justify my actions not doing the right thing because I need to rest on stuff because what I'm doing is going to help pay for their college one day and all these things. And so we go on and on. And I'm also being a good husband. So she needs to get up. Right? Well, here's how I start to see others. Boy, she's being lazy. She's just laying there, not getting up. She's being inconsiderate, unappreciative. She just doesn't appreciate what I do for her. Boy, she's being insensitive, letting that baby cry, not getting up and take care of the baby. Isn't she terrible? What a faker. I know she's just laying there, waiting for me to get up, letting that baby cry. She's not really sleeping. She hears that baby just like I hear the baby. Why isn't she getting up? You know what's the problem with that, by the way?
I'm taking it right now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, she's a lousy mother to let that baby cry. And she's a lousy wife because she's just doing it so that I'll get up and take care of him when I've got a full day tomorrow. See, what we do is we start looking at ourselves as good and the other person as bad. When we put ourselves in the box, when we betray ourselves, all because we chose not to do the right thing in the first place. Remember we said a minute ago, if I honor it, my wife's appreciative, the baby's appreciative, I look good. I've honored myself. I have no resentment, I have no feelings that I have to justify. This takes a lot more work, by the way. Well, that's what happens. I love The Office, by the way. Just a side note. It is funny to me as I'm doing this leadership study at Abilene. I think every professor there is so glad that The Office came out because they make us watch clips all the time of examples of things not to do. And it's like I see so many of these little clips about stuff. So I hardly even watched the show until I took this course. And so now I love it. See, here's the broader impact. When I do that, there's a lack of commitment. I don't commit to things when I'm in the box because it's always trying to do bare minimum. Because why am I going to invest in something that is not really benefiting me? There's a lack of engagement. Now think about this when you think about ministry. Broader impact, troublemaking. When I'm leading in a box and seeing people as objects, then it's just troublemaking. Every complaint, every demand, every suggestion, everything somebody says to me is trouble. You know what I'm talking about? You ever had those people that, hey, I just got a little suggestion for you. Well, if you're in the box and you think of them as being in the box, maybe they've been a thorn in your side in the past or something. Well, everything they say, it could be an elder, it could be a member, it could be a parent, it could be a kid. When you're in that box, well, it's trouble. There's conflict. It's constantly conflict. There's a lack of motivation. I'm not going to go out of my way for somebody when I'm leading in the box. Causes less extra stress. Poor teamwork. Think about that. Ray and I are in the box, and we work up here at the office all the time, and we're constantly seeing each other's objects, then we're actually going to start working against each other, not with each other. Right? And if Ray and I, as we're working here, are trying to do things for the church, doesn't that get in the way of doing what we're doing? Because we're more concerned about our own position, our own job security maybe. I don't know. But when we start doing that, then we're not working as a team. It's poor teamwork. And the whole church suffers from it. If I'm doing that with my wife in my marriage, and I see her as an object, then there's poor teamwork in that marriage. My whole family's going to suffer for it. Gets into backbiting, misalignment, lack of trust, lack of accountability, and communication problems. Look, all those things happen because I betrayed myself. All because I chose to do something other than what I knew was the right thing to do and the right feeling. And by the way, that right feeling, y'all need it up a little bit more. Oops. Oh well, I'll go from there. I got to do this again? Okay. The thing about this is, guys, is that we know from Scripture that we're to be serving. Jesus, in His own leadership, said, follow my example. I'm going to serve, I'm going to do the job that nobody else wants to do. I'm going to wash feet. That's the kind of example Jesus gave us. And as spiritual leaders, we've got to be willing to get out of that box and say, I'm not going to put myself in a box because I want to be a serving leader. And so that means, how do we get out of the box? Well, here's some don'ts and some do's. If you turn on the next sheet, you can write these in if you want to. How do we get out of the box? Well, don't try to be perfect. You're not a perfect person, we know that. But do try to be better. As a spiritual leader, your goal is to try to be better. Constantly. Don't look for others' boxes. If you start going around looking, saying, okay, well, what kind of box are they in? What kind of box are they in? And those elders, boy, they're in a box. And my wife, she's sure in a box. Boy, the way she treats me. If you start looking for everybody else's boxes, you're going to stay in your box. But look for your own boxes. The focus needs to be about yourself and saying, what boxes do I put myself in? What relationships do you have right now, guys? And there's several different relationships. The thing about this is, you can be in a box with some people and not with others. So it's not like you're in a box with everybody. But what are some boxes maybe you're in right now, some relationships? Look for your own box and say, how can I get out of the box when I'm relating with this teenager? How can I get out of the box when I'm relating with my wife? How can I get out of the box when I'm relating to my church members or my leadership? How can I get out of the box? Whether they're going to get out of their box or not, it's not important. It's what you're doing to be a better leader. Don't accuse others of being in the box. Do try and stay out of the box yourself. Don't deny you have been in the box. Do apologize and go forward. We all get in the box. We all get into situations where we forget and we start thinking as people being objects instead of people. But when we do that and we recognize it, we need to apologize for it. Talk about one of the characteristics of a leader is somebody who takes responsibility for their own actions. Well, take responsibility for your actions. Don't focus on what others are doing wrong. Isn't that tough? I mean, as leaders, a lot of times we look around, we can see a lot of things that everybody else is doing wrong. Right? It's a lot easier to point out the wrong things people are doing. But what we need to do is focus on what we can do right. What can I do right so that I can get out of the box in the way I relate to people? Last one is, don't worry you on whether you are helping others. See, as leaders, what really makes us ineffective or can really hinder our leadership is when we're constantly worrying about what's in it for us. Those elders never do this for me. Those parents never help me out. That minister I work with never supports me. He never says anything positive about me from the pulpit. See, we can get into that and it can really affect us because then we put ourselves in that box. And once we get in there, we start relating to everything around us when it comes to our church work, to our ministry, is that. But if we just focus on whether you're helping others, hey, I don't care if Ray's not stroking me every time he gets in the pulpit with nice words. You know, I don't care about that. But when I get up there, I'm going to say some nice things about him. Now, granted, Ray does say good things about me, but you know, or I'm not going to constantly be thinking about what everybody else can do. But I'm going to lift my elders up. I'm going to lift my parents up. I'm going to talk good about my kids. When I'm at the youth ministers meetings, and this is a tough one because we like to use some of that time sometimes to vent a little bit. But hey, when I'm around other people, I'm going to lift my church up. I'm going to lift my wife up. You know what's interesting to me is even in marriage, and for some of you young married guys. One of the things I learned early on in premarital counseling, hopefully you did too, is the idea of there are certain do's and don'ts. And one of the things I was told was, never put your wife down in front of people. And you know what's amazing to me? I can tell the people who've never gotten good advice in their marriage because I can be out with other couples and we can be there and the husband starts talking bad about the wife or the wife starts talking bad about the husband. And I just go, oh, I would never want to do that publicly to somebody. What I was always taught is always lift your wife up. My wife and I can have the biggest fight at our house and get an argument or whatever, and we can be mad at each other. But when we go out with other people, we're not going to talk about that with them. We're either not going to say anything at all, or I'm still going to try to say something nice about her, because at the end of the day, I'm in it for the long haul. And so, yes. But if you've said bad things about her, or she said bad things about you to other people, you're going to go make up, but those people are going to have a bad thought about you. And so don't ever do that. Well, that same thing applies to the people that you lead. Your church family, your kids. So we've got to be real careful. And so that's how we get out of the box. All right? Let's go to the last section. Anybody got any questions or any thoughts that you wanted to share about what we just talked about getting out of the box? Was that helpful at all?
It's true of any
Yeah.
Team members, that they're always more worried about the person in the cubicle next to them.
Yeah.
Not pulling their weight, and how it just is a detriment to your whole work environment when you have that. And it's true in spirit. That it seems like a lot of the older members kind of check out, and they look at their past accomplishments, and they say, well, you know, we did this for 40 years, or I did this 50 years, and I'm just going to kind of sit back and not take on any of those roles that are needed. And then we can get caught up at looking at the older members and say, well, why is it there's only 5 people who teach out of 100? Why is it, you know, I'm the only one who's one of the teachers here? If we get too wrapped up in looking at other people else, we're not helping.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point to make, is that we can look and we even start comparing everybody around us to what the norm is, and saying, okay, is this what I get to do when I get older? I get to just check out, and so it can also affect those that see that. One of the things that we talked about a minute ago, if you had leaders in your life that were influential in your life, and talking about character, my grandfather was one of those people for me. My grandfather, lived to be 89 years old, was a month away from his 90th birthday when he passed away. 2 weeks before he died, he was having a Bible study. Now, let me paint the picture for you. He's got one amputated leg. He's blind in one eye. He's almost deaf. He's in a wheelchair, electric wheelchair, getting around. But he's still an elder to the church. And he's having a Bible study in his apartment that he had that was next door to the church building in Clearwater, in St. Petersburg, Florida. A 40-year-old couple came to church. He started talking to them, had them come over, started having a Bible study with them, and a week before he died, he went to the church and baptized them. He baptized them. They helped him into the baptistry so he could baptize them. 89-year-old man. He died about a heart attack a week later. You know who came to visit and stay with my grandmother? Those two that he baptized the week before. And I remember when I got to the house, they were the ones that were there. And that was his legacy. And I say all that to say, what he always told me when I was growing up, when I first got into ministry, the one thing he said is, he said, you never retire from the Lord's work. And he would always get on to the older people. Why are you retiring? Why are you not? Because that was his idea. And that's true. In our leadership, our character has to be what's our legacy. You don't retire from this. What we're doing in ministry is something that should be for the rest of our lives. And so that gets that consistency. Why is consistency so important? Because it's something I need to be doing until my last breath. We should never think that we're going to retire from the Lord's work. That's what makes this so different of what we do compared to another career or business type job. But I'm talking too much now. So anybody else got any thoughts about that? All right. Looking at the clock, we got about 3 minutes till 15 after. Told y'all we're going to be trying to be done by then. So let's go through the essentials for longevity in ministry. I want to get this part. We can skip the activity in there because of time. Another book that I'm pulling from that I really liked, and in fact, has anybody ever read this book? It's called The Next Generational Leader. Has anybody read that? It's really good. He talks about especially younger ministers and younger people that are leading in the church, and he makes some really good points. But I want to go over these real quick because in your workbooks, even though we didn't do the activity, I want you to look at that because one of the things we talked about earlier was our time. And the last thing I really want to talk about is longevity as we kind of transition into this section. What it asks you to do is to basically kind of think about the things that you lead and to put a time frame. How much time do you spend on this and this and this? And the idea is, and the question that comes out of it is, how much of our time do we really spend on things that don't really matter as much? That we get caught up doing a lot of menial tasks and we get ourselves involved with stuff and put a lot of energy into things that, on the whole, take up a lot of time, aren't as effective. And so we want to be more efficient. So essentials for leadership. If you have time to go back and do that, I would just do it and just kind of look at maybe give you something to think about as how you spend your time. Because we want to get back to competence. And one of the things that Stanley says in his book is competence is do less, accomplish more. In your ministry, if you can organize, and this is something I have to try to do all the time, and I'm not as good at it as I want to be, but the idea of trying to find ways to maximize your day by doing less and accomplishing more, putting more energy and effort into the things that are more important. Prioritizing things can make a difference. He also says courage. Courage establishes leadership. You have to be a courageous leader if you're going to have longevity. Why do you think that is?
You can't shy away from the opportunities.
Okay.
You gotta grab it when it comes. If you see an opportunity, take it.
Okay. Yeah.
So find conviction and integrity that you're going to do it even if nobody else follows because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. You got to have the courage to step up. I mean, there's going to be things in ministry. You're going to have people say things about you. You're going to have people do things to you. And you're going to have to take stands and sometimes that are going to be hard.
I think about Andy's family and what I admire him tremendously. But one of the things he talks about is when he was a young minister, his wife was at home with the kids. And he went to her one day and said, what is one thing I could do to make your life better? And she said, if you could be home by 4 o'clock, I'd be great. That's when everybody, I'm trying to get dinner ready. So he made it, he had the courage. He said it was really difficult to do it, but he said, I'm going to be home every day at 4. Take care of to get in the office at 5 in the morning because he was going to be home by 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
And that took a lot of courage for him to do that, but it established him as a confident leader that everybody said, hey, look what he's doing for his family. You know?
Right. Yeah.
It's a huge step of courage.
It's a good point. So, longevity, we have to have some courage. Clarity. Uncertainty demands clarity. Now think about that for a minute. Uncertainty demands clarity. What does that mean? In ministry, are we certain about everything? No. I can just, a small example of that is, have y'all ever planned an event? Yes? Are you always certain things are going to go the way you plan them? No? I mean, that's a small little example of something we do in ministry, but just think about that. Clarity. We have to be clear about what we're doing. Clear about who you are. Clear about your goal and your vision. Because there's going to be some uncertain times, there's going to be some uncertain people, and you've got to be clear about who you are. If you want to survive and have longevity, you've got to be clear about what you're doing. If not, you're going to get blown around, you're going to get moved around, you're going to get overlooked, all kind of things are going to happen. So clarity is very important. Coaching. We have the lives of many young people and many congregation members and others that see us that we deal with. Coaching enables a leader to go farther and faster. You have to be willing to coach it. You have to be willing to train other people. You have to be willing to teach other people, to share with them. Not so much in the lessons that you make every week, but in your life. As we talked about earlier, your example. And again, character comes up again. Stanley says, character determines legacy. What is your legacy going to be as a leader? You know, we can talk about when you're gone from this earth, what did you leave behind? See, your job, the job of a minister, that can be filled quickly. Just be honest. The programs, events, the church camp, director, counselor, whatever. As soon as you're gone, they'll have somebody in your place. That's just life. But what they can't change is the legacy you leave behind. What about those kids when they're grown up as adults? What they're teaching their kids, or the example they're being, because you helped coach them, you showed them the character, and you helped teach them. The legacy of families that remember you as the person who really cared about them or helped them out when they needed somebody, who taught them the Bible, who baptized them at camp. See, they can't take that away from you. They can't take that example you were, and so your character determines your legacy. What kind of legacy are you leaving? You need to think about. I know we've got a few minutes over, but as we close, I need you to do me one favor. In the back is an evaluation form. If you will take that out and fill it out before we leave for lunch and then give it to me, I would greatly appreciate it, so I can turn those in. But anybody have any questions before we go? As we end up.
Is that how your grandfather lost his life?
No. No. That's not my grandfather, by the way. Thanks, man. Andrew's idea. Anybody got any questions? Any thoughts? Well, guys, take the cup with you. Hope you enjoy the book, and also the devotional book are my gifts to you, just thanking you for coming and helping me with this today and being a part of this workshop. Not that I'm trying to bribe you on the evaluation forms in any form whatsoever, but thank you for doing that. And then as soon as we get done with that, if you'll turn them in, we'll figure out where we're going to go for lunch. I would like to have a prayer before we close, if nobody has anything else to add. Also in the back, there's some references. And if you are interested in any resources other than the books I gave you and talked about, I'll be glad to share with you any of the resources I've been using or have. And I've got several other things too that I have access to or have used. So I'll be glad to share any of that stuff with you. Let's have a prayer. Dear God, thank you so much for today. Thank you for all these young men who have been here to help in this seminar and that have taken part. And Lord, just pray that as Christians, that you help us to have a servant attitude, a servant heart. Lord, help us to lead like Christ. Lord, there's so many things that we do day to day that that call for us to be the example that you want us to be. Lord, we're not always perfect and we fall short sometimes. And Lord, we just pray that you forgive us. But Lord, you help us to get back up and you help us to continue to walk and to grow and to try to strive to be what you want us to be every day. Lord, help us to leave a legacy of character, of godliness in our path. Lord, watch over us, keep us safe. And Lord, again, thank you for each of these people that are here, and what they mean to me and what they mean for your kingdom. Help all of us in our positions, in our jobs, to do the very best we can, everything we do. Lord, help us to lead outside the box and to see people as you see them. People who are sinful, that you love, and that you sent your Son to die on the cross for. That, Lord, we need to love them and to encourage them, be everything we can for them as well. Lord, help us as we leave here. Keep us safe. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you, guys. Eat all the donuts and cookies you want.
Do we have to write our names on the evaluation sheet?
No, I don't think so.